All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I promised as part of our series on what I'm considering the Translation Confidential Minute. In other words, just looking at smaller topics and smaller bite-sized pieces that I think translation buyers would be interested in. Today, we're going to look at the term translation as a feature. And to define that translation as a feature, or TaaF, as you'll hear, it's the integration of machine translation directly into existing software applications, making it accessible to users without needing separate translation tools. So all of you are likely familiar with that because my guess is that in some of the tools you're using right now, translations is embedded. You can click a button and wow, magic, suddenly you have translation. And why is it so prevalent? I mean, for me, I'm thinking even just anecdotally, we go to an e-learning show called DevLearn in the fall every year, and I can tell you that in 2023, there were a few providers that had translation embedded in their workflows. This year in 2024, I would tell you there were a few that didn't have translation embedded. And, for those of us that are in the industry, you can sort of tell those that spend some time on it and really are trying to improve the output that comes out of whatever model they're using, whether it's a large language model or whether it's, Azure or Amazon or Google. I mean, they'll have APIs, right, that you can, with a little bit of development, dovetail into any application. And that's kind of where my concern is. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But just to show you that in one short year, it went from very few tools having embedded translation to very few not having it. So, and that's just in this one world in e-learning. And I think you see it across the board. And big reason is the technological advancements, right? I mean, the tools are far better. So I get it. And there's an increased demand. The global market for machine translation is growing rapidly, and people want to translate more, but spend less and do it more quickly. So I would say that that's a situation that's ripe for tools like TaaF, right? These translation as a feature embedded where you live and the tools you live in. So what are some of the risks? Obviously, cost, security, customization, right? I mean, those are some of the things that you'll want to think about when you look at these tools. And if you're using a tool like Salesforce, well, what does it cost to add a translation feature? You name it, whatever tool it is you're using, what does it cost? And the security, where is that data going? And by the way, if you leave that tool, do those translations stay behind? Do you have rights to them? Can you make edits? I mean, a lot of these tools, it's pretty much just, yeah, we translate it on the fly and it's there. You can't edit it. You can't do anything. It's just there. You can't improve it. If you improve it, if they do have a way to improve it, it won't be improved the next time around. So there's all these workflow concerns, probably too many to go over in detail here, but definitely something that you want to have a conversation with your translation provider about. And for me, it's the customization thing. I mean, it's TAF solutions aren't always going to have the flexibility and the customization you need for your industry, and that goes from the quality of the translation, because again, it's rare that it's going to be a custom model that's built for your company or for your industry that generates the translation. So, is it really better than just the Google API you can get off the shelf, or the Azure API that you can get off the shelf, or OpenAI just putting a prompt in yourself? If it's not, you may want to dig a little deeper and say, what am I paying for here? So anyway, I think Slater gave a really good example that I liked actually. They gave an example of Oracle building a translation model specific to pharmacovigilance. I like that idea. It's because likely the way they built that model is they had oodles of translation that were human verified, and they built an engine that's specific to that industry and to that field. That's a pretty good use of the technology, I would say. All right, so you want to look quickly too at what are kind of the cost analysis and just the differences between if you just said yes to a TaaF solution, or if you did something in house, or if you had your translation provider build something, which is what we're doing as a company. The initial setup, right? TaaF vendors are going to typically charge a fee for the licenses or for the integration or setup. Obviously, there's costs and ongoing. Are you being billed per credit? Are you being billed monthly, annually? What's the maintenance? All of those things. Data usage, the more stuff you flow through the system, like the more you're likely to pay, obviously. Building your own LLM or even MT engine requires a lot of upfront investment and infrastructure and talent and training data, and you may not have that in house. You may not have that. So you may need to look to your translation provider or someone else in your hemisphere that may be able to do that for you. Having your own model or your own MT engine based on your data. So for example, if you're a company that's been doing translation for 20 years, you should have oodles of translation memory and you should be able to build a really, really good MT engine. And that's going to give you far more control. It's going to likely generate far better quality because that's really the goal, right? I mean, I think nirvana for this sort of thing, people would say you just flip a switch and you get translation. Well, I think, you may want to look at, hey, can I have translation and then can I have a human in the loop to make sure that the quality is where it needs to be? I mean, that's going to get you cost savings, time savings. But the goal there, obviously, is to make that first pass translation, that machine translation, as high a quality as possible, right? You've probably heard us on the podcast or and some things we've written in blog posts to talk about what that difference is in quality for Azure and whatever tool you're using out of the box or what it is when you train. And I mean, again, you're typically going to be in the 50 percentile for most languages when you're off the shelf. But then when you train it with your material that's human verified, you're going to get that score into the high 80s, low 90s. So, I'm not a genius, but I think I would rather proofread or edit something that's in the 90th percentile than something that's in the 58th percentile, right? So things to consider. Security challenges. Again, we talked a little bit about this, but who has access to your data and breaches and outages? OpenAI was down the other day. So does that mean that you can't do anything then? You don't have real-time translation. So all the things you do with all of your data and all your processes, you need to figure out redundancy. What do you do when things aren't running? What do you want the workflow to look like? All of those things are really, really important. To me, this is like one of the most important slides here because I think really what's more important than just like, hey, I can flip a switch and get translation, in this tool or whatever the case is to look at the global footprint of what you're trying to do and where you're trying to deliver content. So then look really to customization. That's why tools like Blackbird are going to go crazy for people because that's where you can connect these different tools, right, that are in your environment and deliver these processes in a consistent way. So it all looks very similar. So that customization to me is the important piece. And the control, right? You want to up that quality by using human verified translation that you have in your databases, and you want to determine exactly where you want that translation to appear. In other words, in a chat window or in a manual that you're working on or in a screen that you're working on in your software or in your website or your SharePoint database. That level of control is what you're looking for. And you want to try to get the approach across your whole organization. So to me, this is my favorite slide of the presentation, really. I think you want to develop unique translation capabilities and integrate them into your software ecosystem where you want it to be, not where some third party tells you where it should be. So some things to think about, look at vendor reputation, industry expertise, do some testing and speed, and does it cover all of my languages? Because remember, not all languages are covered in some of these models, right? No matter what tools you look at, there are some limitations. Not all languages are covered. So you'll want to dig deeper into that to make sure you have your whole organization spoken for in terms of what you need. Consider security and data privacy, who has access, and should we separate? Do I get access to that model? All of those sort of things. And review what your costs are. Look at what the total cost of ownership is and do a pilot. Say, hey, can you take me through a pilot? I think that makes a lot of sense. So really, all in all, the goal is to just weigh all these things out. And I think the best way to do it is have a bunch of conversations. Certainly go talk to those tools that have translation as a feature. Take notes. What are the limitations? What are the benefits? And how about if I do this with my translation provider? How can I push my mission forward? How can I do this faster, less expensively, still have the quality that I want, Still make sure that I have humans involved in the processes where I really feel like I need to have humans involved. That's really, really very important. So just some food for thought. Now, when you hear the word TaaF, I hope you're armed and you understand exactly what it is, and you also know what some of the pitfalls are, when looking at the approach. Thanks.